This video is called Some Practical Tips on How to Trust God. And it might sound simple, but it's not. Well, it is and it isn't. It sounds easy, right? Just trust God. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. It sounds simple, but human beings are not simple. So, to wit, tons of people don't trust God. Tons of people. They're angry at him, they're pissed off, they blame him for things that aren't his fault, etc., etc., etc. Just goes on and on and on. The reasons why people don't trust God are like not infinite, but they're very, very numerous. A lot of people who, no matter what their belief about him is, right, they don't trust him. You hear this from like all kinds of people. You start talking about God and these kind of subjects, and they'll tell you why they're angry at God, what they think he did, what they think he should have done that he didn't do. They'll tell you about his characteristics that are, of course, incorrect, that cause them to not trust him. There's just tons of this kind of stuff that goes on that I've seen over the years and that I've read. And that I've listened to. So, and a lot of it's from people of faith too, Christian people, not just people out in the world. It's people in general. So, how do you practically, really trust him? The same way you practically and really trust anybody else, by getting to know him and learning that he is trustworthy. That's the only way. It's not enough to just read it in the Bible and say, oh, okay, that looks good. I think I'll trust him. That doesn't work because it's not personal. You can get a picture in your mind and go, oh, okay, I can trust that. But then a lot of people, there's a lot of things in the Bible that they don't make God look all that great. If you just got to call a spade, right? There's a lot of things in there that people are like, if this is your God, then he's a blankety blank, right? I've heard that so many times over the years. So you have to get to know God personally. That's the only legitimate way to get to be able to trust him. That's a law that God has built into existence. It works with everybody. How do you get to trust anybody? By getting to know them and discovering that they're trustworthy. That's the only way it happens. You can't trust somebody that you don't know. You can read about them and look at them from afar and say, okay, he looks trustworthy. Everybody else is telling me he's trustworthy. So I'm going to take a chance and trust him. Right? And that's okay. That's something. But it's not much. Right? Because you need to trust him personally with all your heart. Right? That would be trusting him with your mind. But okay, he looks trusty. I'm gonna trust him. That's a mind trust. You need a heart trust, right? A heart trust is where you get to know him just like you would anybody. You discover that he's trustworthy and your heart trusts him. That's the only way. This is right in line with the first and greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Why? Because the only place love can be found is inside of a relationship. So when he says that, he's like, hey, come have a relationship with me. Inside of that relationship, you will discover that I am completely worthy of your trust. And then you will trust me with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. That's the process. So to trust God, you have to develop a relationship with God. It just has to be done. There's no other way. You can't shortcut it. There's no shortcuts to it. The relationship will look different for everybody because everybody's different, right? But however it happens, you have to do it. That's how you learn to trust God. Why is this important? It's important for a zillion reasons, but the main reason it's important is because of this. Trust is the doorway into love. You can't be in love with somebody that you don't trust. And since we are called to be in love with God with all of our heart, mind, soul, strength, etc., you have to learn to be able to trust him first. because trust is the doorway into love. You can't live in love with somebody that you don't trust. It is literally impossible. Again, look at it in human relationships. If you have somebody over there who's, manipulating you, gaslighting you, always pulling the rug out from under you, psychologically, always, you never know what's coming your way. You never know when they're going to turn on you, Do you trust that person? No. Of course you don't. And so there's no love with them either. You might have some sort of relationship, but it's an extremely unhealthy one. It's no different with God because the laws of relationships always stay the same. So you have to develop a relationship with God to discover that He is completely and absolutely trustworthy. That will open the door to what? To love. Okay? It's just the way it goes. Another reason that this is important, another way, sorry, train just got off the tracks. Theology. Thank you. I'm back on this track. Bad theology will hinder your trust in God. Okay? If you believe something about God that's not true, then that will hinder, then that could potentially cause you to not trust Him, which would hinder your love with Him. So you have to be careful what theology you listen to, because there's a lot of bad theology out there. And if you're listening to theology that puts up walls between you and God and causes you not to trust Him, then it's probably bad theology. Okay? Now, granted, we don't understand everything, and he does things for reasons we don't understand. But in that case, you have to ask Him to explain it. And He's not so mysterious and distant that He won't answer. That's why we have the relationship with Him. Okay? So that He can do that. Because if you believe something about God that makes Him out to be a jerk, and you never resolve that, then your trust will never be deepened, and your love will remain that shallow to that point. Okay? So be careful what you believe in. And this is what Jesus was talking about when He said, take care how you listen. Because what you listen to and what you believe by highly influential people is not always true. And a good indicator of whether or not it's true, it's not a flawless indicator, but it's a very good indicator of whether or not what they're telling you is true or not, is whether it deepens your trust in God and furthers your love with Him as a result. That's a pretty accurate indicator of good theology. If it does that, it's a pretty good indicator that it's good theology. Not 100%, because God does some things that we don't understand, right? But mostly. And again, with those things that we don't understand, we ask Him. We come to Him in a relationship and say, look, I need you to explain this to me. And He will. I've gone through this process. Having lived 35 plus years in Christian culture, done the whole thing, right? And it's like, finally, after all these years, after spending so much of that time in all these unhealthy beliefs that I'm talking about, and having a very shallow relationship with Him, finally He's broken through and He's taught me this stuff. He's like, hey, what are you believing that for? Don't believe that. I'm not like that at all. Let me show you what I'm really like. And behold, I'm finally learning to trust Him 35 years in. And so what? I'm finally learning to be in love with Him. After 35 years in Christian culture, I'm finally learning what it means to live in the first and greatest commandment, love with God. How? By actually learning to trust Him, by discovering that a lot of the BS that I learned is just simply not true. And He's actually pure love. And that's what He wants. That's not all He wants. That's the majority of what He wants with you, with me, and with every single one of us. Thank you, and have a nice day.